Joining me live and exclusive on the Newstrack is one of the world's leading vaccinologists, director of the Serum Institute at the Oxford University, where this AstraZeneca vaccine has been developed, Professor Adrian Hill. He's the Lakshmi Mittal and Family Professorship of Vaccinology, Director of the Serum Institute, Co-Director of the Oxford Martin Programme for Vaccines, has worked before this on the Ebola vaccine, the malaria vaccine, is an expert on immunology, vaccinology of infectious diseases, and he's just the guy we need to speak to when the Indian government has granted approvals to these two vaccines for an independent perspective, outside of what we're hearing from companies in India, outside of what we're hearing from the government in India, for an independent global perspective on the vaccine rollout. Professor Hill, welcome to India Today.
Thank you.
Congratulations. This is a big day for you and your team at the Serum Institute, and for India, the first approvals coming through formally. How confident are you that the vaccine that you and your team have developed so painstakingly is the solution that the world has been waiting for?
Well, we have a lot of advantages with this vaccine. There's going to be a lot of it available, tens of millions of doses already today, manufactured, ready to go, and much of that in India. We're also very confident that this will be distributed at low cost. This is a non-profit vaccine, so the price of it will probably be lower than most, if not all, other vaccines. And it's pretty simple to deliver. You can store it in a refrigerator. You don't need a freezer or deep freeze as with some other vaccines. And all of those advantages should play into what's most important now, which is really rapid deployment.
How does your vaccine, Professor Hill, compare with Moderna and Pfizer? I ask this because the Indian government says that the Oxford University vaccine has an efficacy of 70%. Moderna and Pfizer are claiming 90 and 94.5. To a layman, that would suggest that the Oxford vaccine isn't quite as efficacious as the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccine. Is that a fair reading of the data?
I think that's over-reading rather limited data that are not directly comparable. So let me explain. There are three things that you would like a vaccine to do against COVID. Most importantly, most people think, is to prevent severe disease, hospitalization, and death. And the very good news is that all of the vaccines you've been mentioning, including the AstraZeneca vaccine, are very close to 100% in terms of their efficacy against severe disease and death. And that's, I would argue, the most important feature of the vaccine. It's not the easiest to measure. It's easier to measure clinical cases, most of which are fairly mild. And that's the number that you have been quoting for Moderna, which is of the order of 90 to 95%. For the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, the efficacy against mild COVID depends on how you use the vaccine. In other words, do you give a single dose where the efficacy is 73%, or do you give two doses at a long interval, maybe 3 months between the first and the second, which we're now seeing is giving higher efficacy. And that makes sense to us because the immune response is stronger if you have a 3-month interval between the first and second dose. So many regulators are taking the view that that might be advantageous. It's easier to deploy in an emergency setting if you don't have to give the first and second dose within a few weeks. And finally, the third thing you like a vaccine to do is to prevent transmission. That's much harder to measure. Can you measure whether the vaccine is stopping people who are vaccinated giving the virus to other people? And we have preliminary data on that, which suggests that that is possible as well. So I'm afraid it's a complicated picture in terms of exactly how these vaccines compare. The trials have been done somewhat differently, but the really good news is that all of them are very highly effective against severe COVID and death.